Greetings, friends. It is Tuesday, September 1st. Here we are in September. I saw some funny pictures on Facebook today of some families who have done some, things with their families, some pictures of their families for first day of school that were just, hilarious. Like, all the children had these big plastic coats on and these masks, and everything was covered up. And one of them said something like, "This is the 6,000th day or something from of spring break, and we're finally going back to school." Those kind of things. So we're thinking of our children who are getting ready to do that, and the difficulty, school districts are having with getting this going, and then having outbreaks and stuff like that. So I know our kids start on Tuesday around here next week after Labor Day, so we're going to be in prayer for all of them and their families. All right, I'm going to do something today that we're not supposed to do. We're told not to do in seminary, but I'm reading from the Message today because I like the words that are used here, and I know they didn't come from Jesus because he wouldn't have used hanging on like it's used here, but it fits our story very well today. So I'm reading from the end of chapter 19 in the Gospel of Luke. From then on, Jesus taught each day in the temple. The high priests, religion scholars, and the leaders of the people were trying their best to find a way to get rid of him. But with the people hanging on every word he spoke, they couldn't come up with anything. So, we stood upon stars, finding God in lost places. Roger Thompson tells this story of crabs and men, Ventura and the Channel Islands National Park in California. When people who don't live on the beach discover that I surf, they often ask if I'm afraid of sharks. The short answer is no, which surprises people. I assure them it's not because I'm super brave. It's that my only shark sighting was in the Channel Islands National Park, while my brush with death in the surf was due to a much more nefarious sea creature. For generations, C Street has been the home surf break for Ventura surfers. The waves form over a shallow cove between a short point of land and the pier. Since the ocean floor determines the shape of a wave, the waves of C Street break mellow and slow. On any given day, the lineup fills with beginner surfers and aging friends who have surfed every swell together for 50 years or more. The break is named for California Street, a 4-block boulevard connecting Pacific swells to historic City Hall and the independent stores and cafes of downtown Ventura. City Hall is perched on a hill overlooking the pier, where hillside views connect downtown, the beaches, and Channel Islands National Park, only a short distance from Ventura's shoreline. Channel Islands is a protected sea sanctuary surrounding a primitive landscape of grasslands, creeks, and forests, and oceans as pristine as when Native Americans gathered food from the crystal clear bays. Beyond the bays, the ocean's food chain swims in full abundance, with those near the top of the chain, dolphins, whales, otters, sharks, most visible. Lurking below is the creature related to my near demise. On a recent day, I came in after a mellow session with my older son. The tide was low, with the ocean floor covered by plate-sized boulders made slippery with sea moss. I've walked these waters for more than 30 years and am used to keeping my feet on boulders while leaning on my surfboard to offset my weight. I've never had a problem. This time, however, it felt as if my little toe had been crushed between two boulders. The water was too deep to lift my foot above the surface, so I couldn't take a look. I assumed I'd slipped off one rock and jammed my toe into another. With one hand on my board and the other one waving wildly to keep my balance, I hopped on one foot to shallower water. The pain got worse with every hop. My son, who heard me reacting to the pain, as could many of the people on the beach, came to help. "What's wrong, Dad?" "I don't know. I think I broke my toe." The pain pulsed, traveled through my leg, and throbbed in some nerve center of my brain where I thought about what type of cast I'd need for a broken toe. To balance myself, I placed both hands on my board and slowly lifted my leg to the side. When my foot rose from the water, a high-pitched shrieking followed it. What is that? The screaming wasn't coming from my 10-year-old son or from the little girls watching us from the beach. It was coming from me, a 41-year-old man with a large crab attached to his little toe. I kicked my leg and lost my balance and fell backward in the water. In all the commotion, the crab clamped on harder to my pinky toe. I screamed for my son to help. He immediately ran as fast as he could away from the sea monster. "That's okay, son. Save yourself. Tell your mommy I love her." Now I was alone in the ocean, fighting for my life. I've spent most of my life on or near the water. It's more of who I am than where I went to school or where I work. I have great respect for the ocean. I've defined myself as a surfer, a product of a coastal town, and in younger years, a bit of a waterman. I took great pride in this definition, but on this day, the crab was challenging my identity. It's a little known fact that crabs are the only creatures a great white shark is afraid of. That may not be true, I just made it up. But they should be afraid. It's easy for a shark to pick on other creatures because the shark sits atop the food chain. Meanwhile, crabs will attack anything, no matter its size. If I'd stepped on the crab, I would have crushed it, instead of it crushing me. I regained my composure, no longer splashing like a child in the shallow end of the pool. I came up with a plan to avoid dying in 3 feet of water as a common shore crab consumed me piece by piece. Using my board for balance, I got back on one foot and raised the other from the water. The crab by this time was dangling casually from my toe by a single claw. It looked like a rock climber. I wanted to stare into the eyes of my enemy, so to see into its black soul and get inside its head. I couldn't find its eyes, but I noticed 2 little orbs dangling from the front of its shell. I moved my head for a better staring position. No luck. Each eye was dangling in different direction, mostly to the side. The crab tightened its grip, causing my toe to give off signals that it was being severed from the rest of my foot. I tried again to shake the crab from my foot, but it clamped harder. It tucked its 8 arachnid legs closely to its body, while the non-toe clenching claw waved freely like a cowboy riding a bull. I'd have to pry it off. Then things got awkward. I'm not super stretchy. It has been a while since I'd last touched my toes. My surfing was on a rapid decline while my weight was on a rapid rise. I thought if I held on to surfing, I wouldn't feel so middle-aged. I'd become a version of myself I promised I never would, the non-stretchy kind. I wanted my sons to think they had a cool dad who surfed and did the things they liked to do. But on this day, their dad was screaming, rolling, and splashing in 3 feet of water with a crab attached to his pinky toe. "Oh, I'd let us all down," he said. Survival begins with acceptance of current facts. I was getting older. Things that once came easy no longer would. I was no longer all that I used to be, but the best version of myself could still lie ahead. Calming myself, I placed one hand palm down on the surfboard and gained sure footing with the non-crab foot. Then I bent my body, raising my leg toward my torso while reaching my free arm toward the foot. It looked like a yoga pose. It was, "There's a freaking crab on my toe" pose. I got my hand close to the crab and realized how grotesque those things are. Its underbelly looked like a Batman costume with molded abs and slimy green goo between abdominal crevices. The top shell was smooth and rippled like a good skipping stone. Its claws were massively oversized for its body. Between its eyes, which still hadn't focused on anything, were two dangly antennae moving like garden worms. In the middle of this was a mouth, constantly chopping, in anticipation of consuming my flesh. With my free hand, I tried to pry the claw open. It wouldn't let go. Blood oozed from my toe. I nearly fainted. When it seemed there was no hope, that I'd been eaten by a common crab only 15 feet from the shore, I gave one last desperate kick. The crab came free. It skipped along the water a couple of times before sinking. The last thing I saw was a single claw waving defiantly above the water's surface. I hobbled my mangled, bloodied toe to the van, where my son was already dried off and dressed. He spoke first. "We should have crab for dinner tonight." That is so boy man right there. So boy man. We should have crab for dinner tonight. So all kinds of things can hang on us, and all kinds of things can we hang on to. Let us pray. Gracious God, we are grateful for laughter. Laughter helps us in times like we find ourselves. Laughter helps any day, but especially when we're down or sad or mad, or it's a hard day because of, news we've seen or statistics, or we've heard the death of a loved one in our family, or somebody's sick. It's hard. It's a hard time. We're worried about our children going back to school, our grandchildren. We're worried about teachers. Administrations are doing their best. And we're worrying about people helping not to spread this pandemic anymore. We pray for places where there is consternation and indignation and protest and anger. We pray fiercely that violence will not break out and be the answer, because it is not the answer, gracious God. Help us to get around the table together, to do that so that we may find a way, that you can make the way when we feel there is no way. Help us to ratchet down the fear so that we can indeed relate to one another as human beings. We pray, gracious God, that we will hang on to your words. Hang on to your word as we know it in Jesus Christ. Hang on to his words instead of hanging on to others' words who don't shore us up and pull us up and give us reason for life, which Jesus Christ does with every word he says. We pray today that you imbue us with your loving word, that we may hang on to it for dear life. And we pray the prayer Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. It makes a difference about what is hanging on us and what we are hanging on to. Think about it and hang on God's word.